We're taking the time out this week to talk about something that we're doing in my ministry, switching from a weekly program to weekly small groups. This is the Youth Worker Daily. Hey friends, welcome back to the Youth Worker Daily, where we hope to encourage youth workers just like you with tools, tips, resources, and helps so that you thrive in your ministry. My name is Jay Hyam, and this is Conversations with Everyday Youth Workers, the podcast of the Youth Worker Daily. And it's on this podcast that we get together with youth workers. We hear their stories. We spend time talking about what God has been doing in their lives, and we spend time talking about what's happening in our youth ministry. And this is episode 18, and it's going to be a little different from normal in that we're taking some time this week to kind of catch you up with some things that have been happening in my ministry. Um, we disappeared for about 2 weeks, and during those 2 weeks, we had to make some changes to our student ministry since we are in this season of COVID. And so today on the episode, we're going to talk about some of those changes and the implications and the impacts and maybe some of the benefits that we're already beginning to see because of the decision we made to switch up what we were doing. But before we get into all of that, as always, I'd like to take a few minutes to welcome you and say thanks for checking us out today, visiting us here on the Youth Worker Daily. Today is a unique day. Not only are we doing something different with the podcast, but it's actually Wednesday. We normally post these on Thursdays, but because this week is the Youth Ministry Exchange Web Conference that will take place on Thursday and Friday, we're getting our podcast out one day early ahead of all of that. So that we can still post something and not be in competition, because I'm sure my little podcast here is going to create a internet traffic jam, and yeah, don't want to put the web conference at risk. But we do want to encourage you, if you have not registered for the Youth Ministry Exchange Web Conference, we want to help you do that. It is about we're pretty close to being done with registration. I think it's like you may actually not be able to get registered now that I think about it. But to get all the information, you want to head over to their website, and we'll put the link in the show notes here below, so that you can get to the proper website, and you can get yourself registered. I'm actually going to be participating in the web conference as an attendee, so maybe we'll have a chance to be in the same roundtable or discussion or whatever it is that they're doing. Maybe we'll have a chance to meet and talk, but go ahead, check them out, and get registered for that, because I think it's going to be a super cool and beneficial thing for us, especially since there are no in-person conferences taking place this year. This is a joint effort. There's a number of organizations that are backing this and providing their support to make this happen. So it actually might be a really cool thing to see how it all comes together and how the different conference groups and organizers work together to pull this off. So I'm pretty interested in seeing how all that shakes out. So Youth Ministry Exchange Web Conference, that's coming up this Thursday and Friday here in October. So you may want to go and check that out. So we're doing this on a Wednesday, which is kind of out of the norm. But with that, we want to encourage you to check out the website, youthworkerdaily.com. That is where you will find not only the links to these podcasts, but also links to our vlog and our blog and all the resources and things that we are posting and sharing and trying to make available for you in your ministry. And so would encourage you to do that, and also ask that you look us up on social media. You can find us at YTH Worker Daily. That is at YTH Worker Daily. And you'll find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Come and join us. Follow along, have fun with us, share some of your great ideas, tag us in it, and we'll share it with everyone who's following us. And together we can encourage each other and provide ideas and resources and help as we navigate youth ministry in in a COVID society, because we're still navigating through all of that. Also, want to take a few minutes here before we actually get into the update, and that is to invite you to be a guest on the podcast. As I said, as we opened up, this is a podcast that focuses on having conversations with the everyday youth worker. That means if you are in youth ministry, whether you are full time, part time, or a volunteer, you have a story. God is using you to impact students. He's doing something in your life as you do that. And really, this is an attempt for us to get to know each other, to share the things that God is doing, and to learn from each other. And so we're looking for guests to be here on the podcast with me. And to do that, it's super easy. Just jump on over to the website, theyouthworkerdaily.com, click on the link for podcast, and then click on the link for guest. We have a short little form where we ask for your name, a phone number, and an email, your church affiliation. We ask for a little summary, and really that's it. You hit submit, and then I will follow up with you with an email, and we'll get things rolling to get you. We do a Zoom interview, and then we take the audio from the Zoom interview, and we put that into the podcast, and we set up a time for it to go live. So, really would love to connect with you, hear your story, and share some of the things that God is doing in your ministry. We also want to take a few seconds and encourage you to go back and make sure you've listened to the podcasts. This is episode 18, and with the exception of a couple of podcasts where we just talk about the podcast, we've got some really great interviews from youth workers from all different seasons and areas of the country. And it's been so good to have these conversations and to get to learn and be challenged by each other. And so yeah, go back, listen, and catch up if you've missed any of them, because they're all there. And it's kind of fun to see that someone is actually listening to the podcast, and so hugely appreciate that. So a couple weeks ago, we kind of disappeared. We got to episode 16. We were going every single Thursday, and then we kind of disappeared for 2 weeks. And it wasn't for a lack of content, because we actually had a podcast lined up to go. I hadn't finished putting it all together yet. The interview was done, and I had edited it and get it ready. I just had to do the opening and the closing pieces, and something kind of got in the way of that, and took me a little while to get back around. But um, because this is a podcast where we want to encourage youth workers, sometimes that encouragement comes, as we deal with some of our successes and with our failures in ministry. And if you listen to episode 17, we talked for a little while, Tracy Hardwick on the podcast, and we talked about this past season of COVID being an opportunity for us as youth workers to kind of evaluate our strategy for student ministry, and to really kind of look at what is it that we're doing right, what is it that we're doing well, what is it that we're not doing it right, or we're missing like the mark in what we're attempting to do. What were our deficiencies or our weaknesses? And I know for me and in my ministry here, uh, it's definitely been a challenging season to kind of sort through and maneuver through those waters, because um, I've been doing student ministry for a long time, and I will confess that it's easy to get into a routine or even a rut of what youth ministry is. You go through your week, you're planning for your midweek program, you're making sure all your leaders are on board, you're sending out the invites, you're doing mass emails, mass text messages to your students, and you kind of get in this rhythm of each week being the same, and you're just moving through what you're doing. And I think one of the things that I've learned in this season of COVID is there's a real danger when we kind of find ourselves settling into a season where we're just going through the motions. And I don't know that I was quite in that spot, because, I've shared before on the podcast, we're just a little over a year into our new church. And it's always within that first year you see, that year is full of learning the culture of the church, learning the students, learning your leaders, learning the program. And so I feel like it's a more active and intentional, because you're learning how to do ministry in a new place. um but usually it's after you've got that figured out, so that you fall into that place of, you know ministry as it goes. And so, um I don't think I was there yet, but I know in the past, as I look back over my years of youth ministry in different churches, I can definitely say I've been in that place where it had become a routine. And so I think one of the things that we've been learning in this season is to really kind of face the honest truth of what is it that we're attempting to do in student ministry, and are we really accomplishing anything? And I asked myself that question, and I've kind of had to feel through what that looks like. And it came with a lot of frustration and a lot of like aha moments for me. So I wanted to kind of just unpack for you a little bit. And if you listen to the past podcast, I talk about some of the frustrations and the things that we've been dealing with here in our church. But um, as we've made this significant change to what we do with our students, um I hope it'll be helpful, if not at least something for you to be thinking about. So let me just start with a quick update here. So it was back in March, around March 15th, 16th, 17th, that we got the word that COVID was in our community. And the recommendations were coming down that there be no large group meetings of any kind. And so one of the ways that kind of trickled down was, um, the schools around us shut down for, at the time, it was just to be a week. And at the same time, the decision was made by our church leadership that we were going to go online, that we would not be meeting in person. And so we did that. Of course, like many of you, we all scrambled real quick to figure out how to do youth ministry online. And, we've had that conversation over and over again with some other youth workers. Um, but from that point on, word came down. We were under stay-at-home orders. So there wasn't going anywhere. The stores were closed, restaurants were closed. There were some essential grocery stores and essential services that were available. But for the most part, my family and I, we hunkered in at home, and we were home probably for a solid 3 months, March, April, and May, before we really started venturing out anywhere. And at that time, all of our ministry was all online. We moved our student ministry online. We jumped between Facebook and eventually ended on YouTube. We created children's resources for our children's ministry. Sunday mornings were on Facebook as a church. And that's kind of like that's how life was back then. But now here we are. It's September. Actually, it's October now. But in September, we started having conversations about, what is it going to look like for us to get back. We were waiting and waiting. Our school started back later than usual, and so we were sitting and just waiting to see what was going to happen, and then kind of move forward with whatever it was that was happening in our area. And we had some ideas, and we had a couple plans of what we could do, but really it was a matter of just waiting to see what we would be allowed to do, and then executing some of those plans. So what happened really was, we got through a summer of really not being able to be with our students. We were a no contact, no, we weren't getting together with our students at all. It wasn't until August that I actually was able to start meeting and doing one-on-ones with students, and even our leaders. Like, that was one of the weird things too. We didn't do anything. Um, but September came around, our kids went back to school, and we had planned for our kickoff for the fall. And we thought, we gathered our leaders together in August, and we thought through some ideas. And the one was we would kick off with a Zoom gathering, simply because we had wanted to see and connect and actually engage with our students. And providing something on YouTube would only allow us to have um, interaction in the chat space. And if we were on Facebook, it would be the same. We would only have interaction with our students in the chat space. And so we really wanted to see our students. We wanted to talk with our students. And so we chose Zoom for our kickoff, and we kept it pretty low key. I mean, it's kind of hard to kick something off, and build lots of excitement, and then say, oh, we're going to be on Zoom after a summer struggling with trying to get kids to come to Zoom. But we promote it, we recruit it, we remind it, and we launched. And on that night, we had such a low turnout of students. We were excited for the students who came, but compared to how many students should have come, it was quite a difference in response. Um, and so that really led to kind of a come to Jesus moment, if I could use that expression, for us. We thought we're going to do Zoom, we'll kick things off. And then the rest of the plan was to go back to doing what we were doing in March, April, and May. And that was to create this online content that students could then check in on Tuesday nights when we have our group, and we could watch. But coming off of that first kickoff, man, it didn't sit right with any of us. We were not happy with the situation with being on Zoom. We knew that our students didn't want to be on Zoom. They had made that quite clear in conversations, and we talked with parents, and parents were struggling to encourage their kids to get onto Zoom because they just didn't want to be there. And so I was, as the leader, I was pretty frustrated at that point. Really, just this is not how I want to see ministry, happen in this next year, especially coming off of a summer where we didn't have that connection, that contact with our students. And now here we are at Zoom, the beginning of the year, and there's a real possibility that we're not going to get that connection. And so I chalked that up as, our COVID online fail. It just Zoom kickoff wasn't ideal. And so really, it kind of forced me to think differently. And I had been thinking a little bit more about what it would look like to move to a small group format, and kind of just abandon the whole midweek content, internet, Zoom, YouTube, just leave all of that behind. And over the course of the summer, I had conversation with a number of youth workers, and one of the things that we kind of started shifting towards, even over the summer, was, putting the emphasis for our leaders and myself to be more intentional at connecting with students through cards in the mail, through text messages, through phone calls. Really trying to reach out to our students in a real personal way. Yeah, we still did some mass texting and some mass emails just to kind of do some general, contact work, but we really focused on just making that contact one-on-one with students. Like I said, in August, I was able to start meeting with our students, and so brought that back into the program. But all the while, kind of thinking, what would it look like for us as a student ministry to, move to a platform or a format where we could have that intentional interaction. And really, the only place that type of relationship happens is in the area of small groups. And so I had that thought. And then after we totally failed on our Zoom kickoff, I sat down in little makeshift office at home, and I said, we've got to do this better. And I remember having a conversation with my wife saying, I'm really thinking that we need to make the move to small groups and see if that might be a way for us to connect with our students. um, and it's not like small groups weren't already on our radar. But being a year in here, recruiting new leaders, one of the things I had kind of like envisioned moving forward was that we would spend the first year as a new leader with new leaders and new students, and building this program. We would spend the year just focusing on large group Tuesday night, because that's the night that we meet, fun, and not really jumping too far into discipleship, at least not yet. If there were a couple students that were mature enough and ready to take those steps, we would do that on a more one-on-one basis. But small groups for me were always going to be part of year two. That we would bring those in, coming in the time of like January 2021. Like, we wanted to get through 2020, give my leaders plenty of time to build relationships with students, have some fun, do some training, do some growing of their own, and then in the new year 2021 we would jump into small groups. Well, I sat down after this kickoff, and I just started imagining what would it look like for us to move into small groups a little earlier than planned, and came up with a couple ideas, and then set a meeting with one of our pastors, the kind of the pastor that sits over me a little bit, and said, "Hey, we've got to do something different, because this is not going to work. Already, the response from parents and from students is not good." Um, and this was like within days from our Zoom kickoff. And I said, "Here's kind of what I'm playing around with. I want to make the move, and it's a bold move at this point. I want to make the move to small groups, for us to kind of think about what it would look like to arrange our students in a way that they could meet in person in someone's home, with a couple of our leaders." And instead of doing the big rah 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 midweek program, we do more intentional small group ministry. And so we ran through a couple ideas. We settled on the one that we liked, as far as like modeled and what we wanted to do. And from that point on, that was so our kickoff was on a Tuesday night. That meeting, I believe, took place on a Thursday morning. The next couple days, was all about reimagining our youth group and moving it to a small group model. And we had to do it quick, because the very next week we were scheduled to start a new series online on YouTube, and obviously we decided we weren't going to do that. And so what we did instead is we did a quick one-off YouTube meeting. The leaders were able to be there. I was able to be there. We interacted in the um, chat area. Our attendance was a little better than what it was the first week, um, but we made it work, and that gave us enough time to kind of at least wrap our heads around the idea that we were going to go to small groups. And then the rest of that week was all that, coming up with curriculum, and organizing small groups in a way that made sense for us and for this season that we are in. The next Tuesday came, and we did one more one-off YouTube video. Really, all it was us announcing that we were moving to small groups. So we had like a game at the beginning, then we moved into announcements, and then we had some worship recorded, and then we made this announcement saying we were going to go to small groups, and that tonight we're on YouTube, but all of the leaders were actually at the church, and we were going through what small groups would look like, because they would start the very next week. Um, and so within 2 weeks time, we went from, hey, we're going to be on YouTube, we're going to build these content videos, we'll have engagement in the chat room, and we'll continue to work on relationships, to, all right, now we need to think small group, we need to think material, we need to think who's in what group, we need to figure out where they're all going to meet, and all of this had to happen within 2 weeks. And so um, that's why we didn't have a podcast for 2 weeks, because literally my days were spent figuring all this stuff out. Um, and then um, and then once we had things figured out, like I said, it was about meeting with my leaders, walking them through what's gonna happen, what it's gonna look like, how to use the material. And fortunately, I have amazing leaders, and they were on board. They were supportive. They agreed that we needed to do something different, and because they love our students so much, they were easily willing to go and move into the small group format and make these changes. And so that's kind of where we've been. 2 weeks of coming up with small groups, and we are now 3 weeks into those small groups meeting. In fact, it's so you're hearing this on Wednesday, but you know the magic of podcasts. They're recorded in advance and then they're posted. So this is actually the third Tuesday of which on which I'm recording, the third Tuesday of our small groups. And just with the first 2 weeks, we had such an incredibly positive reaction from both students and parents. Um, it's kind of solidified our decision. It's proven that we made the right call in moving to small groups. And now I want to just kind of move us from the why and into some of the how and kind of what we're already learning and seeing because we've made the move into small groups here. And basically, that boils down to the how. So, what does it look like for us to do small groups? Well, we had to make some tough decisions. So we are not a huge youth group when we meet, but when we do meet, our numbers can go anywhere from 20, 25, all the way up to as many as maybe 40, 45. We've even seen some weeks where we've had 50 or more just here in the little over a year that I've been here. And so our our master list of students totals over 115 students, but not all of them are active. Not all of them come to very much. We may see them once, twice, maybe three times a year. And so the whole question was, how do we make small groups happen knowing what our numbers are looking like? And I think this is where we as youth workers need to be like really honest about our numbers, and have that transparency, because we all say it's not about the numbers, but we'll always tote, oh, we have this many coming out, or we have that many doing this. And sometimes those numbers are true, sometimes they're slightly exaggerated. I mean, let's be real. But it kind of started with me saying, okay, let's really look at our roles, our database, and let's really see who's involved and who's not involved. And so our first look at the list was just, all right, who's no longer on this list, whether they've graduated, whether they've moved away, whether they've just outright said, you know what, we're not doing youth group at your church anymore, we're over here, or whatever. The first step was just simply saying who our students are. And that narrowed the list down, not by a huge amount, but it definitely narrowed the list down as we updated, students that had graduated, or students that had moved out of the area. And that led us to question number two. Now, out of the remaining students, how many of these are regular active students, and how many of these are, once in a while? And so we went through those names again, and we kind of picked out, the students that we had not yet seen in the year that I've been here, or the students that we've only seen once or twice. And we made a list of students who had been really active, or at least regular, taking into account that some students, because of their sports season or club season or whatever's going on at school, there are some students that will miss a couple weeks because of that season. But otherwise, they still hang out with us, they still do activities with us, they're still considered to be regular or active. And so we actually took our list from about 110, 115, somewhere in that ballpark, and we whittled it down to somewhere in the ballpark of like 46 students. 46 students between middle school and high school that we would deem as regular and active. In that we had been in conversation with them over the summer. They've had relationships with our leaders. Even before COVID, you could pretty much guarantee they were going to be at youth group on Tuesday night. And so we took that number and we said, okay, let's start with this. These are our active students. Let's build these small groups with these students. And so we broke them down by high school, middle school, and then gender. So we started with 4 middle school groups, because that was the other nice thing about the numbers, is when we actually broke the numbers down between high school, middle school, guys versus girls, it actually created for us a pretty good looking uh, small group numbers wise. So we broke them all down. And the only exception that we've made so far is to our rising sixth graders. So any fifth grader who finished the school year as a fifth grader and was now starting as a sixth grader, we allowed them to register for small groups and we counted them in to our number, which I think our actual number is like 42, and now we're at 46 because of the students that we brought in. Again, not a huge youth group, but it's pretty healthy. Um, and so we started off with a middle school group for guys, a middle school group for girls, a middle school group for guys, a high school group for guys, and a high school group for girls. And like I said, the numbers as they were exactly where we needed them to be, because we were trying to keep them, under a certain number so that we could be together and not risk anything by having too many people showing up. With that, we also had the perfect ratio for leaders. We were able to put 2 adult leaders in each of those groups, which was perfect. And as the director, I actually did not have to take a group, because we had enough leaders to do that, and I'll talk about that role in a little bit here. Um, and then we put the word out that we were looking for some families to host the small groups, ideally starting outside while the weather was nice, and then moving them indoors once the weather started to change. And so we looked for families that had this space that could entertain both outside or could entertain us inside. And so once they were on board, we were able to launch, and with a lot of fanfare and a lot of communication, we jumped into small groups. And like I said, we are tonight is week 3, because it's Tuesday as I'm recording this. You're hearing it on Wednesday, but we have small groups tonight, and so far, we've seen a lot of really exciting things happen in our youth group. The other positive thing in all of this is we made the decision to move from creating our themes and kind of structuring what we taught based on our students. We moved from that kind of idea of thinking to actually going with a curriculum. With the mindset being, with a curriculum, we can properly plan ahead. The curriculum will come with the resources that our small group leaders are going to need, and we'll be able to put that in front of our leaders in a timely manner so that they have the time to actually prep and be ready for each week. Whereas what we were normally doing is we would come up with a series and we would take it week by week, but we would kind of prep for the coming week as we wrapped up the current week. And now that we're not doing that, how do you prep somebody when you don't have the ability to be with them? So having, curriculum became a really important part of all of this. And we have just started using Grow Kids materials at the beginning of 2020. And this was a perfect opportunity for us to renew our subscription with Grow Kids, but also begin a subscription with Grow Students. And man, what a great decision that was for us as a church and as a student ministry. Super happy and pleased with the resources that come from Grow. for both our kids and for our students. And I'll do a whole nother podcast with them. Actually, I would love to have Kenny and Elle on this podcast at some point, just so that we can talk about grow and just how beneficial and impacting it is. Um, but we went with grow, and like I said, it's been awesome. You with the material, you're able to divvy things out, so our leaders have all the material a month in advance. There's time for them to look through the materials and plan ahead. And then what we do is we just take the time that would be the main teaching time, and we've started creating just teaching videos. And so what we do is the small groups start. There's a time for them to socialize and catch up with each other. Then there's time for them to play a game together and have some fun. Then we move into a teaching time. And to help the leadership, we've created these teaching videos that they're able to download onto a laptop or a tablet or whatever, and then they show that video to their group, and then it's followed up with some discussion questions that group provides. So we're keeping everything within the scope of what the group material offers, and then there's some time for prayer. And in all of this, we've had tremendous success with it. And so we're super stoked. And like I said, maybe we can get Kenny or Elle or both of them on the podcast here in the coming weeks, and we can talk about the material. But super happy with Grow. Now, in doing all of this, yes, there was a little bit of stress getting it all together and making some big decisions and lining things up. And then, the whole tension of, okay, we're launching. Hopefully it all goes well. Hopefully everybody shows up at the right spot. We've had to work through that. And, of course, we're going to, have to figure out a few things because, we have specific goals in mind for these small groups. But, hey, 2 weeks in, and I am not complaining. In fact, the benefits of all this have been incredible. And we kept our goals and our expectations kind of low as we were rolling into this. Um, but we did have in mind some things that, I wanted to see happen. And I wanted to see some things happening within the life and ministry of my leaders. So if I were to kind of like think through the benefits of small groups, at least in this case, I got a couple of thoughts I want to share with you. First off, we are definitely seeing the benefit of intentional relationships. And here's kind of what I was sharing with my leaders. When we get together on our midweek for our midweek program, that time with students is really program driven. You welcome them, you play a game with them, and then you move them into the worship and teaching space, and you do whatever it is that you do in that space. You have your worship, you have your teaching, maybe you break into discussion groups, maybe you are just done and you have hangout time and snacks. But that's a pretty programmed and time limited structure. And it's super easy for us to get caught up in the program and the time, because I remember when we launched into doing things differently in this new year, we were about sticking to time so that we started on time, that we ended on time, and that we accomplished everything that we wanted to do. And in that time, we left, 15, 20 minutes in the front end, maybe 15 minutes in the back end, depending on how the whole program went. I'll be honest, most weeks we kind of were running to get everything done before, parents showed up to pick up kids. But the leaders really didn't have the time to sit and talk with our students. At best, maybe 5, maybe 10 minutes in passing, they would have a chance to have a conversation with a student. And while those are great for just kind of laying the foundation, you're not going to really get to know a student in 5 minutes. And so what we've already discovered is that these small groups are giving my leaders that intentional time for them to build relationships. And right after our first week, I scurried and met one-on-one with a bunch of the small group leaders just to get those first thoughts. And more than one leader commented how much better it was for them because they were able to actually sit down and talk with our students. That is huge. If our goal as youth workers is to win a student to the time and place, the opportunity for us to share the gospel, well, that happens in the midst of those relationships. And if we're not taking time to have intentional relationships with our students, then all they're going to see us as good for is just something entertaining in the midweek. Um, and so, right off the bat, one of our first benefits that we have seen is that our leaders now have the time for intentional relationships. And like I said, this is huge. It's already making an impact in our leaders and more importantly in our students. And mind you, we're only 2 weeks in, 2 weeks in, and we're already seeing students opening up and feeling like someone knows them, someone cares about them, and someone is truly interested in what they're doing in their lives. Huge, huge win. The second benefit I think that we are already seeing in these small groups is a new and refreshed focus on discipleship. That we are now not just focusing on being intentional in our relationships, but we're able now to be intentional in how we're discipling students. And this is going to be something that we're going to develop as we go. But uh, last week, great example. So right now, the high school guys are meeting in my garage, and I let my two leaders lead. And so last week, I kind of slipped in the back and just wanted to sit in on some of the discussion to see just how things were going. And the conversation and the questions and the opportunity for students to talk and for leaders to listen, and then vice versa. Um, this is going to be another huge payoff for our small groups. The fact that students can because of these relationships, they have this safety and security that they can talk to our leaders, and our leaders are going to listen, and they're going to care, and they're going to offer whatever help or advice or encouragement that they can and that the student needs. And this is going to be that the foundation for discipleship, because we're able to take what we're teaching, and using our discussion time and those questions, we're able to begin thinking about what it looks like for us to apply what we've just learned into our lives so that we can begin to reflect what it looks like to live our lives like Jesus does. And that is at the heart of what discipleship is all about. And so, focus on discipleship is super exciting. And, hey, it's a win for us. The third benefit that I'm already seeing 2 weeks in is leadership development. And this is huge. So I am an old school guy. I remember when I first was recruiting, and part of my practice was, we would recruit leaders. We would bring them into the general population with our students, get them to start building relationships, watching other leaders. But our focus was, we'll train you, and after a season of training and observing, then we'll let you loose with the students. And that had been my course of action for years. But this, even recently, that whole idea, I've kind of thrown that out the window, all because of a conversation I had with Mac Lake. If you go back to episode 15, I interviewed Mac Lake, who has just released his newest leadership book called Leading Others, that we actually are giving away a copy of. In the interview, he makes a comment, because I asked him, how do we do this in the youth ministry? How do we create leaders? How do we develop leaders for our student ministries? And his practice is pretty cool. He was like, well, you bring somebody in, and the first week you get them to observe, have them sit there, have them watch. And he gives, if I remember correctly, he says, I'm going to give you 3 questions that you're going to ask me, or so I want you to observe. And I think I'm getting this right. Go back and listen to the podcast. He totally explains this way better. But basically, he says, let them observe the first week, and then the second week, let them do it. Let them observe week 1, how you do it, and then let them do it week 2. Well, we tried that within the high school group, because one of our leaders wasn't able to be there for week 1. I sat in on week 1. I led the teaching time, the game time, the discussion time. But then right afterwards, I sent a text to the co-leader and I said, next week, you're running it. And he did. So week 2, the other co-leader was back. So the 2 leaders were in the high school group again, and he led it. And he did awesome. And it was just this idea that to take a leader and instead of not wasting, but instead of giving up like maybe 3 months to training and observing, um, Mac's philosophy is let's get him in to do it, and we're not throwing him to the sharks. We're going to provide support and ongoing help, which is what we are doing, but to actually just let a leader lead is huge, and I'm seeing that in the other groups. So in our groups, we have 4 leaders that have some history, have spent time working with me or with our students, and we have 4 leaders that are relatively new. And so even in other groups, I'm already hearing that the leaders, I don't want to call them the head leader because that's not their role, but the leaders who have the experience, they're hearing from their co-leaders that are like, hey, I want to do this. And we're moving to a place where now they are doing that as well. And so by making the shift to small groups, not only are we developing, intentional relationships, not only are we focusing on discipleship, but now we are developing leaders by allowing leaders to be leaders, and that is huge. The fourth benefit here in our small group time has been the opportunity for our students to connect, to actually begin developing new friendships, building new relationships, getting to know each other. We started our season, and yes, we have material and curriculum, but one of the things that we kind of said for our leaders was, hey, this isn't about the material and you getting all the material done. This is about us getting to know our students and our students getting to know each other. And so we are already seeing a dramatic shift from how students interacted in our midweek programming to how they're interacting in these small groups, in that they're conversing with each other, they're getting to know each other, they're laughing together. One of the fun things that we have coming up is the small groups are each going to host costume parties, and each of the groups are going to come up with a theme, and then they're going to wear costumes to support that theme, and the small group who has the best theme and costume gets a pizza party. Well, the excitement level for this is huge, in that one of our groups, our girls middle school group, they decided on a theme, and they got all excited about it and figured out who was going to be what. And I have a middle school daughter, and she was in that group, and she came home and she was all smiles, so excited about what they were doing and their plans for this costume party. And so what we're seeing is we're seeing students connecting in ways that usually it's a retreat, or a mission trip or a summer camp where kids finally come together. We're seeing all that happen right in our small group. And again, for me, that's another win. So 4 benefits for what we're seeing happen. It's been a huge decision for us, but way, way on the side of this was the best decision that we could make. And it actually kind of like sets us up with the question of, are we ever going to go back to a program ministry? And honestly, I would probably say I'm at this point, I'm not sure. I don't know that we will ever be a program based student ministry. I think, and kind of I'm hoping that us making this shift to small groups is a permanent shift, that that having these intentional relationships, having this focus on discipleship, having these opportunities for leadership development, and for students to be connecting, my hope is that this is what they're going to want. Now, that's not to say that we're never going to have a midweek, or, we're not going to do retreats anymore. Like, we're going to do all of that stuff still, but our emphasis currently is going to be on these small groups, because we see these things happening. And, if we had if I had my druthers, if I really could have what I wanted for my students, like, this is what I want to see happening in our ministry for the sake of our students, so that they know that they have, relationships where they are known and they're cared for, where we are being intentional about uh, discipling them and helping them to reflect Jesus in their lives. That our leaders are getting a chance to actually be leaders, and not just warm bodies in a room, and that our students have now these communities where they're connecting with their peers and they're growing together. That's, in my mind, what I want for my students. There are some other things that are out there, like, what about worship? What about, taking time to do things like retreats and mission trips? Yeah, we're going to do that, and we're already having discussions with our church leadership. Not that we've planned anything yet, but we've danced around the idea of, what does it look like for our students to be not just attending Sunday morning worship with the church, but to actually be engaging in it, and not just like serving as ushers, or offering takers, but to actually be a part of the service, helping to lead worship, to be a part of the praise team, to do a welcome and share announcements, or even to be a part of like the sound team, where they are able to participate in a positive way within the service. Like, those are all the things that we read about in, like, Growing Young and Sticky Faith, and this idea of keychain leadership and passing down to the younger generation, giving students the ownership to be part of the larger church. And so we've had these conversations, and now we're at a place where we're like, what if this is what we've been reading and thinking about? And so it's kind of fun to have those conversations. Um, Guys, I know this is a much longer, this is a long conversation, but here's kind of like, if there were takeaways, here would be maybe a couple takeaways. Now, um, we're all in different situations. For me, our church is just now planning to get back in the building starting in November. So we're mid October. It's November that we're planning to get back in the building. But when we get back in the building, the focus is going to be just Sunday morning worship, and it's going to be limited, and it's going to be different, because we have to adhere to all of the COVID stuff, and we want to keep people safe. But already the decision has been made. We will not have student ministry midweek, the way we used to. There will be no children's ministry the way we used to. All those things will come in time. But these small groups have allowed for us to be in person with our students in a way that is uh, good for our students, but also safe and healthy. We keep our numbers low. Students do have to RSVP each week so that we know who's going to be in the groups. We try not to go over a certain number. We do try to keep them outside and socially distanced when we are meeting. Now, the weather is changing, and so we're going to be bringing the students inside here in the next couple of weeks. But in doing that, they already know, we've already made it public that we're going to come in, and indoors you're going to have to wear masks. We're going to still attempt to socially distance the best we can. Um, but the goal is going to be that we continue to do what we're doing and do it in a safe way. And so, depending on where you are and what your situation is, maybe ask yourself, is the midweek, the program based ministry, is it something that's still ideal for you and your ministry? Now, I know there are larger churches that are able to pull off the live stream, still have online content, and do in person. We're just not that church. And at the same time, I know there are smaller churches that are able to meet together and do all the stuff that they would normally do as part of their midweek or whatever their program night is, and they can do that. And so, for me, we're kind of sitting in the middle there. We don't have the possibility of doing, live streaming and content, and in person, and we're a little too big to do kind of the smaller church model of midweek services. And so for us, um, these small groups have really been an answer for us. And so maybe they're an answer for you. Maybe you're zoomed out. Maybe your students are over the whole internet thing, and maybe you're thinking and trying to figure out what's next. How do I do this? How can I connect with my students? Um, you know, maybe you rethink small groups. Um, Maybe you rethink what it looks like for you to meet, in a small group way, and still be able to have that connection. Lastly, here, I had said earlier, I do not have a small group. I have enough leaders that there are two leaders with each group at this time right now. There's no need for me to be in those small groups. So what that does afford me the opportunity of is being able to go and visit each of these small groups. And so starting in November, because we're 2 weeks in, we have 2 weeks left, and we have the Halloween party or the costume party that we're going to do, and we have another couple things here that are happening tonight. So starting in November, I'm going to have the opportunity to actually go and visit these small groups. And so, we'll set up with the small group leaders, and I'll roll in, and I might have some surprises or some fun giveaways or whatever. But my goal then will be to connect with students, hear a little bit about what's been happening in their small group. Of course, we want to grab some pictures, and have some fun together. But then to roll out and allow my leaders to continue to do what they're doing, because my goal for my leaders is that they're being leaders. They're not just being there. Like, I want them to be leaders. And so super excited about all of that. And Yeah, I'll get back on an update maybe in a 2 weeks time here as we get closer to the holidays, kind of give you a better look at how all this is coming together. So, um, guys, thank you. I know that was huge, that was long, but I am just so excited by what God is doing in our student ministry right now, and what He's doing with these small groups, and even the response that we've had from the church, from the parents, from the leadership. Like, I'm just thrilled. I am beyond stoked with what God is doing, and I want to encourage you. If you have any questions, reach out to me. I love to talk more about this. I mean, because we're definitely not doing traditional small groups. Like, it's not like what you sign up for it and you show up for it. Like, we're trying to make these a little different, but what we're doing seems to be working, and we're really excited about all of that, and we praise God for His faithfulness and His goodness to us and to our students, through all of this. And I want to give a quick shout out to my leaders. Sometimes they listen to this podcast, sometimes they don't, but I know my church leadership does. Our pastors listen, and so, just thank you for the support and the encouragement. Thank you for the freedom to try new things. To my leaders, thank you for being so willing to make this shift and in 2 weeks go from an online content program to hands-on intentional small group program. And what you guys are doing in the lives of our students is huge, and I couldn't be more excited for you and for our students. So a great big thank you to our pastors and our leadership and our student leaders, and just for how they've conducted ourselves as a church through this whole COVID season. I am very humbled to be on this staff and very proud of how we have handled it, as a church, through this season. So Thank you all so much. If you do want to have a conversation about small groups, even a conversation about how do we do programming differently, whether you're in person or online, whether you're mixing it up with a live feed and a live audience and online streaming, I would love to have that conversation. I think there's still a lot of things that we are learning and can learn and need to learn. I do think youth ministry has changed, and I'm not sure we'll ever go back to the way it was. I think there's always going to be now this hybrid or this new adaptation of what youth ministry looks like. um, but at the same time, for as much as there has been this increase of online ministry, it's still about the relationships. It's still about the student. And, if we're spending too much time online, then we're spending it in the wrong places. So, yeah. As always, guys, thank you so much for listening to this week's podcast. I hope that this has been encouraging to you. If you find yourself in the same place, I know I've said it already, reach out to me. I'd love to talk with you and help you through that process. Props to grow kids, grow students. Love you guys, love the materials. Kenny and Elle, if you ever hear this, I want you on the podcast. Please reach out to me. Love to just to have you here to share what grow means and how it can help churches and in any way that we can have that partnership. I would love to do that. To everyone else, make sure you're following us. Visit us on the website youthworkerdaily.com, social media at YTHWorkerDaily, and be a guest, guys. We're looking for some guests. We want to get a new person every single week from now until the end of the year. And so we're looking for a few more guests that are willing to come and to share the things that God is doing in their ministry. So hit us up at the Youth Worker Daily. Click on the link for podcast and then the link for guest, and we'll get you on the podcast. All right. Hey, we have a winner in our giveaway. We were giving away Mac Lake's new book, Leading Others, and we're going to make that announcement right after the Youth Ministry Exchange web conference. We've already reached out to that person, and as soon as we have some things from them, we will announce our winner, and I'm hoping to have them on the podcast as well. And so be looking forward to that. Hopefully, we have that announcement for you next week. Other than that, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for what you do for and with your students. And as you move through this season of I don't know, whatever this is, just keep faithful. Be on your knees in prayer. And even when you feel frustrated and beaten down, know that God has promised that what we do, what we speak, His word never comes back void. That what you are doing is making a difference in a student's life. And, take hope in that, rejoice in that, because God doesn't fail. And hopefully, this season won't be much longer, and we'll be back to ministry. Don't know what it'll look like, but we'll be back to ministry, and we'll be with our students, and we'll see what God has been doing through all of this. My prayers, we'll see it then. All right, that's going to do it. Thank you for listening to Conversations with Everyday Youth Workers. Again, my name is Jay Hyam, and this is the Youth Worker Daily. Have a great week.